Hi, I'm Erin Larkin and I'm here today at Lamont's in Cottesloe. It's a fantastic wine store, and this is John Jens, the wine man in Western Australia, who's also the owner and buyer of Lamont's wines here. So I've been working on and off with Lamont's for about 8 years, and it's the selection of wines in the store. They always carry plenty of Burgundy, but the really exciting part for me is it is very, very heavy in West Australian wines. And what we have here today, John, are 5 of Western Australia's greatest Cabernets, plus a contextual Cabernet from the Yarra Valley to help anchor it all. So what are we doing here? What have we got?
So, from my point of view, and there's going to be plenty of people who disagree, Western Australia is putting out the predominant number of great Cabernets in Australia. There are wines like Mount Mary, which is sensational, and this, the 17 is a great wine, and the 15 was a great wine too. But if you look at the show system, in 2014, Western Australia, and that means Margaret River, got 5 of the 7 best Cabernet capital city wine trophies. 5 of 7 again in 2015, all 7 in 2016, 5 of 7 in each of 17 and 18. Unbelievable. Margaret River produces 1.5% of Australia's Cabernet. And then last year, in 2019, how does the West do it? 7 of 7 again, as it was in 2016. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the West is producing all of Australia's greatest Cabernets. It's not. But in the show system, it's doing very, very well. And wines like this, the Mount Mary, prove that the great Eastern States wines are truly extraordinary wines. Erin, there's very little difference in quality between these wines.
Agreed.
These, I believe, and we can't say definitively because there are many great Cabernets around the country, but these, in my view, and I reckon yours, are include many of Western Australia's greatest Cabernets made to date, because year by year by year, decade by decade, we're getting better. These are the more recent new releases, and they're sensational.
And just to add to that, what we're going to see, because 2018 was such a magnificent vintage in Margaret River, most of the premium Cabernets that have been released are really only at 16 or 17 vintage. 16 was very, very, very good, and I would say probably excellent, and 17 was very cool, but the wines produced from that year have been magnificent as well. But the 18s, I think, when they are released, we're going to be having a much more vigorous conversation about those, because from what I've seen of the 18 vintage, it's jaw-droppingly good.
I have to be really careful here because I don't want to get anyone into trouble, but Erin and I both spend a lot of time with key Eastern States wine writers. James Halliday, a little while ago, said to me that the Eastern States wine producers were giving him a little bit of a hard time because he was writing up so many Western Australian wines. I mentioned that point to a few of Western Australia's greatest wine producers. They looked a little bit puzzled and said, wow, if they think that our wines are good now and a threat to what they're doing now, they should see what we've got in the barrel and in the tank and in the bottle right now, because they're even better.
I was hoping you'd say that. Okay, great. So let's start with these. So I have in glass number 1, Mosswood, Tom Cullity, Vanya, Madeline, the Clementine, Eloise, and then the Mount Mary. And John has the same wines in the same order, starting from that end of the table. So, John, the Mosswood, this has only just been released, a week ago?
Yes.
A week. I think it's incredible. I was staggered by this wine when I first tried it, because it is much purer and much more fine than I was expecting from an on-release Mosswood Cabernet. As we know, Mosswoods age for decades and decades and decades. I'm born in 1986, and each year on my birthday I try and track down 1986 Cabernets to drink with my great friends, and we drink an 86 Cabernet almost every year from Mosswood, and they are magnificent almost every single year. So those wines are pretty young at that point.
I, with the courtesy of Peter Forrestal, the founder of Australian Gourmet Traveller Wine, tried the 75 a couple of years ago. Perfect neck, absolutely outstanding, 35 years of age, off 4 or 5 year old vines, truly wonderful. The West produces Cabernets and Chardonnays that live beyond most. We can't say the longest living in the country, but they certainly live for a very long time. Mosswood usually makes a full, round, soft, gently textured, almost subliminally oaked wine that just have no edges, no corners, brilliant finish and brilliant aftertaste, and they're the consumer's favourite. They're what the consumers want. If I get in any number of these wines from other producers. I can sell just so much of them. Mosswood Cabernet, I buy every box that I can get, up to 50 dozen, in the past up to 150 dozen a year, knowing that people are going to race in and buy them because consumers love them. This wine, touch finer, touch more elegant than the slightly warmer years before it, touch more fragrant, as Keith says, and he comes back to that again and again. So it's a hint more savoury, hint more fragrant, beautifully structured, enormous length, brilliant finish, brilliant aftertaste, and but not cheap. You know, recommended retail is $130, $140. You can buy it cheaper, but that's the recommended retail price. Lovely wine, delicious aromatics, a little bit softer, a little bit more willowy, perhaps than usual.
That's a nice word for it. I agree. I agree. I really enjoyed it. Moving on to the Tom Cullity 2016. So this is the third release of the Tom Cullity wine. Obviously, prior to that was the Heytesbury Red, the last vintage being 2012 vintage. This, look, I have seen every vintage of the Tom Cullity, and the 2013 being the first release was plush, ripe, round, delicious. The 14 totally floored me. And again, when we looked at it just this February against the new release 2016, I was only slightly higher on the 14 by maybe half a point. But looking at this wine here today, I mean, that's about as perfect a picture of Cabernet as I think you might like in a glass.
Okay, so Tom Cullity at Vasse Felix, the first new vineyard in the new era, first commercial vineyard in the new era. But it took until Virginia Wilcox's arrival in the middle 2000s, to come on. And since then, in almost every vintage since, she's gradually been lifting the bar on both Chardonnay and Cabernet with her experiments, her work, her clear thinking. She is a great public speaker. She and Brian Crozer, expert Aluma, are the great public speakers, in my mind, in explaining wine in Australia. Virginia is fantastic. Tom Cullity, third vintage, and 13, 14, 15,
Actually,
16,
fourth vintage. Fourth.
Will you keep me on track?
Sorry.
And the fourth vintage, clearly the best so far, and clearly the best wine that Vasse Felix have made to date, despite the fact that the Heytesbury Chardonnays are getting better and better and better as well.
One of my favourite Chardonnays from Margaret River every
truly
year.
Wonderful. And this wine, a little bit more structured, a little bit more oak than is showing on the Mosswood. So it's less, perhaps less fruity, more structured, but equal length. Length is the key to quality. These wines have all have enormous length by Australian and by New World standards. These are great wines by world standards. Perhaps not as the greatest in the world, but they're not far behind it.
You know, I think this one might be in the most danger of being drunk early, just in terms of it being perfectly ready as a capsule of perfection now. Do you know, it doesn't, I think that, well, I know that this will age for decades and decades, but looking at it today, it's very difficult to see how it's going to last till 2022, for example. But I think that that would be bad, but I'm not sure how you could not drink that.
Erin and I have tasted a lot of wines together over the years, thousands of different wines together over the years. Erin and her new generation, with her abilities, has the ability to describe wines in a way that I only envy. I can't do it, I don't have the skills, I don't have the knowledge. Truly extraordinary by the way that I put it. And not only the term, it's the way she puts the words together that I love. I describe wine slightly differently. I rely more on the length of flavour, the texture, the density of the fruit, the edges, the corners, the quality of the tannins, but length of flavour, finish and aftertaste. The Tom Cullity is a great wine and I love it. I think it's going to be very good. But I'd find it hard to select one of these over another because I looked at them all a second ago just before you got a chance to say them. And I thought, wow, which one do I prefer? And we taste master, we point everything we try. I'd find it very hard to differentiate between these wines. There is one I probably put a touch ahead, but we'll come back to that later.
Moving on to wine number 3. So this is a very rare wine actually. So Vanya has made 859 bottles of this. This is her flagship Cabernet, and to my palate, this is perhaps one of the most elegant and Pinot-esque Cabernets that's been made in Margaret River thus far. And certainly, when I look at the structure, say, of the Madeline, which I think is a much more expected Cabernet structure, the Vanya is just silky and mellifluous almost. It's like dappled light, you know.
Okay, so I reckon that Vanya started making great Cabernets in 97 and 98. I reckon the tannin softened a little bit, structure became a little bit softer, tannins became a little bit softer, but I've loved the wines. They and Mosswood were the early great Cabernet producers in Margaret River. Then in 2012, the first of the Vanyas, the first of this label, of which there have been about 4 or 5 so far, better check this time, and the nearly 100% Cabernet, as compared to the normal Cabernet Merlot blend for the Diana Madeline. Each one has been fine, elegant, textured, soft, gentle, moving to ethereal, absolutely and totally seamless, enormous length, brilliant finish, brilliant aftertaste. You can almost lose them in a tasting of bigger, stronger, more structured wines because it's just so fine. You've got to look for the craftsmanship. With this range, and the 12 and 15, the first two, were both James Halliday's Cabernet Sauvignons of the year, at the same time almost as this wine, the 2018 Diana Madeline, the previous vintage, was Halliday's Cabernet Blend of the year, and I think the 12 was as well. So Vanya's doing an extraordinary job with both Cabernet and Cabernet blends, but also, in my opinion, and the reason why I think and hope she got Halliday's Chardonnay Winemaker of the Year, Winemaker of the Year, in 2019, was that she also does an extraordinary job with Cabernets. The latest Kevin John is spectacular, but the Legacy series, which she only makes from 25 to 75 dozen of a year, and that's not a year actually, some years there's none at all, in fact probably 3 of the last 5 years there haven't been one. They're nearly $300, but they are great wines. With these, that puts her amongst the greatest winemakers in the country, in my view.
It's well said. I can't add anything to that. It's beautiful.
Truly a great wine, 19.3, and 12 and 15 may even be better.
We should do a lineup, because I haven't done one of you.
Pretty close. We don't taste everything together, and don't tell her though.
Yeah, well, I'll remember that. Diana Madeline, 2018. So I want to preface this by saying that I came in here the other week because John said I have 5 wines for you to try. I'm not telling you what they are. I've got them set up for you at the back. You just need to come out, look at them and go home again. So I walked into a tasting just like this. 3 whites and 2 reds. And the first of the 2 reds was the 2018 Cullen Diana Madeline. I was absolutely blown away by this wine. It has a colour which you cannot properly see on film, and it's like an iridescent ruby. And the flavour, I mean, if you put them side by side, the DNA of the maker, Vanya, is across both of these wines. But certainly this is a very different styled Cabernet to the Vanya. And the flavour just jumps out of the glass. It jumps out of the glass. And the layers of flavour in this wine are I describe them as steps. I mean, every riser has got flavours and every platform is a viewing platform. It goes up and up and up. And it's just incredible. I mean, I personally think this is her best release of the Diana Madeline or the Reserve Cab Merlot to date. Okay,
many people, in my opinion, agree with you. For example, Nick Stock, who works with James Suckling, one of the great wine reviewers, one of the great websites on earth. Nick says he just recently tasted 500 Margaret River wines. He put this as equal first with one other wine, and 99 points, and loved it. Ray Jordan, the best known and the most effective of the, and I mean most effective, of the Western Australian wine writers, has given it 99 points too. Says Vanya, with the new Chardonnay as well, the new Kevin John, the 2018, has made the best wine she's ever made. Fantastic wine, and I agree totally. There's more flavour, both in Chardonnays and Cabernets. Vanya packs flavour down into that bottle, into every mouthful of flavour. There's more character. Yeah. Whereas this one is finer, elegant, and more subtle. This is in your face, strong, powerful, enormous length, and delicious flavours. Just delicious flavours.
Fabulous, isn't it?
And in fact, this is the best glass I've had so far.
Yeah.
That nose is just wonderful. Of course, we are using different glasses.
You're using Gabriel
glasses.
Yeah, these are my new glasses. So this is my first outing in a decent tasting with these new Gabriel glasses, and I have forever been a vigorous proponent of Riedel and I still love Riedel because I think Riedel Veritas for Champagne and for Chardonnay are unmatched. But certainly the Riedel Magnum universal glasses I've been using both at home and at work for 6 or 7 years. These Gabriel glasses are incredible actually for aromatics and for flavour. I'm going to say it's almost incomparable. I need to do a more in-depth test, but yeah, I'm really excited by them, thrilled by them, actually.
I think that's really important. I remember that great article by James Halliday, probably 20 years ago, where he specified that one of the great English wine, one of the great I think it was a Bordeaux winemaker, I'll have to stop and think about that, what it was, poured, without James's knowledge, the same wine into 7 or 8 different Riedel glasses and then asked James to point them. James said they were not the same wines. The host said, yes, they are. James said, they're not. The host said, give me your highest and lowest pointed wines. Put down a glass of exactly the same glass behind them, poured 2 wines. James couldn't believe it. Glasses make all the difference. Even in these two, same wine, and it's the Mosswood, the nose is quite different. And Jeremy Oliver, the great Melbourne wine writer, there are great people in the East as well.
Very great people.
Jeremy Oliver specified to me many years ago that he made sure that he used the same wines, same glasses continuously over tastings, because if he went to this from, for example, an old XL4, XL5, he gave totally different points. So therefore he had to use the same glasses consistently to make sure he gave equivalent points to what he would have in the past. Glass is very important.
It's crucial. Yeah. Even if you don't purchase super premium glasses, they have to be the same.
Yes.
Okay, so moving on to the Woodlands Clementine Eloise. So this is not the most current release of this wine. There is a Chloe Anne, which is a 2017, which I loved. I just recently looked at the 17 Chloe Anne versus the 16 Clementine Eloise and loved them both. I was slightly higher on the 16. Just I think there's a ripeness and a succulence to the fruit where the 17 was more elegant and fine, owing to the vintage conditions. This is an incredible wine. I mean, it's difficult to know how to get better than this. The order that I've put them in, by the way, is important because I've done it effectively based on tannins and impact on the palate, because I think that if you start with the finer wines, you can move through into the heavier wines without having to go backwards. And the Yarra I've put at the end for a reason we'll discuss in a second. This usually every year, and in this case, in this tasting, has got incredible tannin structure and can be, and I used to think some of the earlier Cabernets on release were more difficult to drink straight away. But looking at this wine, this proves me completely wrong. Still love the tannins and the structure, but this is an incredibly beautiful, open, delightful wine.
Okay, so Woodlands in Margaret River, just across the road from Mosswood, which could be important, perhaps 2 minutes from Cullen's, just even closer to Piero.
Vasse Felix.
A little bit further away, but still quite close. Now producing consistently very close to Margaret River's greatest Cabernets. I don't know if they match the finest of the Vanyas. I think they probably do match. I put the Vanyas, I rate them very, very highly. They're class, but finer, more elegant. These guys are spectacular. From about they made great wines in the past on a great site, but from 2004 onwards, I think they probably produced the best Cabernet in Margaret River in 2004.
Yes.
And in more recent times, they've got better and better and better. The new younger family members, Stuart and Andrew, are in there making the wines now. They are doing a great job. The 12, the 14, even the 15 Russell, which was a slightly cooler vintage, brilliant wine. My customers love it, and so do I. And then you've got 16 Clementine Eloise. Better, again, they believe it's better. Erin and I believe it's better. It's better balanced, better length, better finish, better aftertaste, probably better oak selection as well. And they've also brought in the latest equipment for berry sorting and that sort of stuff, which is making slightly less aggressive wines in the past. Absolutely delicious, wonderful nose, pure complexity. Love that oak selection and oak usage, absolutely brilliant. And not very often that Erin makes even the slightest error, but in fact, that Chloe Anne, that was a one-off that hasn't been actually released yet.
Whoa, okay,
So this is still the current release.
There you go. I'm sorry, that is an error.
Oh no, but we love seeing stuff before it's released, though.
We do, and actually it's the birth year of my eldest son, and so I was looking at it with great relish. Obviously, as a wine collector, you try and get every excuse that you can to buy more wine without getting in trouble from your other half. My husband is not that pleased with my wine purchasing. And the 2017 absolutely made it onto the list of what I'll be getting from that vintage because is an incredible wine. Let's talk about the Mount Mary for a minute, because I have come into the wine world in almost a blinkered way, because I see so many great wines in here that it starts to become a belief that Margaret River makes the best Chardonnay and Cabernet in the country, which I still believe is the case. But there are many wines that are made over east that are thrillingly good and should make everyone here very nervous because of how brilliant they are. And this Mount Mary Quintet 2017, I had this with Jeremy Oliver late 2019, and this is one of his top picks from the year. And I was staggered by the elegance and the beauty of it. And for me, the flavours are all perfect, but it was the texture that really got me thinking. And actually the texture in this, which is silky and fine and almost slippery with grip still, kind of reminded me of the Vanya, which is partly why we've picked them both today. You may disagree with me there, but I find this Mount Mary to be utterly beguiling.
Okay, I've never thought about these two, the Vanya and the Mount Mary, in that way, but in hindsight, and having heard what you said, I agree totally. I said earlier that I was from a different generation. I know you've just guessed that with my hair. I was bringing Mount Mary into Western Australia, and I'm Victorian initially, but moved across here in 1977. I was bringing Mount Mary from the 1979 and 80 vintages into Western Australia. In 1990, I bought 40 dozen across when it was more expensive than 707, and Penfold's been 707 and Hill of Grace. Absolutely loved it. Thought it was the great wine of that marvellous vintage, and that was backed up in the press in years to come. Always the wines were finer, elegant, you used the word slippery, seamless. They had subtle oak handling, and even more subtle than often we get on Mosswood, which is probably the subtlest of the Western Australians. And in mask lineups that I'm involved in, and I'm involved in a lot, I'm not saying that I know people in the East will have their own views, and people in the West will have their own views, but the Mount Marys are more often than any other Australian wine, I will assume, in mask lineups, chosen as the Bordeaux in the lineup. Since Sam Middleton has taken over in the last few years, the grandson of the great John, Sam is making great wine. The 15 was outstanding. He was Halliday's winemaker of the year about 2 years ago with the release of the 15 Cabernet, Quintet, which James only gave 98 points to. He gave 99 points to the Pinot. Sam and I believe perhaps he should have given a touch more to the Cabernet because we loved it. But because I talked to Sam at length about it. Tremendous wines, class act, serious length, different texture, different flavour profile to the other wines. Western Australia is relying on fruit and length. The Mount Mary has got a few challenging, not in a bad way, lovely, delicious, complex hints of secondary flavours which we're more used to seeing in the Bordeaux, which could be a little bit of what I said before. This is a marvellous wine. Erin wanted to put this on. I said, geez, I wish I had a bottle of the 15. She said, don't worry about the 15.
Love
this
the
is
17.
sensational.
Yeah.
I now agree with Erin.
I usually, when I'm in a mask tasting, try and look for certain characters which will put me into a region, and I often see sort of wild raspberry and pomegranate in the red fruit spectrum from Margaret River. When we get into this Mount Mary wine, it still has that red fruit sweetness, but it kind of puts me into really great ripe heirloom tomatoes at the peak of the season, where they're juicy and they're kind of sweet, but they also have saltiness to them. That's sort of where I am with this Yarra Valley Cabernet. And so I think those two fruit, for my palate, those fruit spectrums really define the two regional differences but you know, as you say, I could be wrong. John, that's about all we have time for. As usual, it's as much a pleasure to taste with you as it is to talk with you. So thank you.
It's really good to see you. Great chance to look at the wines, and I'm sure we're going to sit down and have a look at them again now.